Are flashbacks in One Piece getting longer? In this video, we'll be going through all the flashbacks in the story to see if that's true or not. First things first, we have to set up some rules. Number 1, the flashback has to be continuous. For example, the Rebecca and Kairos flashbacks are about 20 chapters apart, so they're separate, and we're not adding random pages from other chapters in the total page count. Second, the flashback has to be over a chapter long, so 17 pages and over. With that said, all of these are going to be cut. And we're left with the 19 longest flashbacks in One Piece, accounting for 1,462 pages, over 85 chapters, comprising 7 to 8% of the entire story. So let's go through them all, starting from the shortest one on the list with only 17 pages, barely surviving the cut. It's Kiro's flashback running from chapter 741 to 742, which might be surprising to some, but since Dressrosa split its main backstory into 3 different parts, each got less pages, but adding them together, it comes out to be the 11th longest in the story. Let's switch up and go all the way back to chapter 56, with the first flashback in the story that went past one chapter, which was Sanji's at 40 pages long. It was over 6 times as long as Zoro's. Next up is Nami's, which was even longer, reaching 49 pages, making it the longest in the East Blue, to no one's surprise, I'm guessing. But what might be surprising is that Chopper's was almost as long as Sanji's, and Nami's put together at 81 pages, making it the first to crack into the top 10 longest in the story at 9th place. Next up is the first non-Straw Hat flashback in One Piece that went past one chapter, which was Vivi's at 25 pages. It took about 160 chapters, but the Straw Hat domination is over, especially because after this comes the longest yet, with Nolan's being the first to reach over 100 pages, totaling at 116. The Straw Hats have been dethroned, with one of the few flashback-only characters on the list taking the top spot. Even with Frankie's 93 pages, it's still not enough to beat Nolan, especially with that train cutting it short. But Robin gets it back in blood with the longest flashback in the story yet, with a whopping 121 pages, not to be topped in hundreds of chapters. But until then, we have Brooks with 34 pages, surprisingly being the Straw Hat, with the shortest backstory on this list, with the longest belonging to the Captain and his brothers. 200 chapters after Robin's The ASL flashback topped it by 4 pages, sitting at 125 pages, making it the second longest to date, only being topped relatively recently. And with that, we've ended the pre-Timeskip with 9 out of the 19 flashbacks, with an average page count of 76. Moving to Post-Timeskip, we're starting with one of the longest in the series, that being the Fishman Island flashback with a total of 114 pages, just a few shy of beating out Nolan's. Next up in Dressrosa, we see how Doflamingo took over the country in a span of 24 pages. Pretty quick if I do say so myself, but to go even further into his past, we have to move on to Law's flashback, which is the 4th to pass 100 pages at 101 with a crazy 2-for-1 deal. Doflamingo and Law make an unexpectedly good team. But what's up next might be a little contentious, with only 2 uninterrupted chapters. It may be broken up a lot, but the Zoe flashback never has more than 1 chapter in between the main story and the past, so I'll count it as 1. And if I do, it comes out to about 79 pages. Next up is Sanji's second backstory, which is surprisingly half as long as his first, standing at an unexpectedly low 21 pages, the second shortest on this list, making Big Mom's with 36 pages the longest backstory in this arc, easily beating Sanji. But while Whole Cake Island had 2 flashbacks that made it on this list, the longest arc in the story only had 1, but it was still 4 times longer than both of them put together, with 227 pages, making it the longest in the story by far, usurping ASL by over 100 pages. Oden's flashback alone accounts for almost 10% of Wano, and more than 1% of the entire story, which is kinda wild. So with that, we've caught up to the most recent arc in the story, with the second to last flashback on this list being located in the Reverie, with 47 pages. Sabo and Im cooked with this one. But the centerpiece of Egghead Island, and undoubtedly one of the greatest backstories in the story, is about the best dad in One Piece, the Goat Kuma, with it having 112 pages and running from chapter 1095 to 1102. That makes it the 6th longest in the whole story. And with that, we've gone through all the major flashbacks in the story. Now we can move on to the stats and see if they're really getting longer or not. But first, let's go through some interesting stats with the data collected thus far. Let's take a look at the time between the flashbacks. The shortest interval is between the most recent 2, but the longest breaks are between Vivi and Nolan with 121 chapters, and between Oden and the Reverie with 109. They're the only times there's been over 100 chapters. Between major flashbacks, the gap between Fishman Island and Dressrosa being just 1 chapter shy from making it 3. Funnily enough, Brooks was the loneliest flashback for the longest time, with an 88 and 93 chapter gap on both sides, until Oden saved him by taking his place. If we look at it another way, focusing on the Straw Hats, there were only 2 non-Straw Hat flashbacks pre-Timeskip, and only 1 Straw Hat flashback post-Timeskip. Now if we separate them by whether they're Straw Hats or not, and take a look at the average page count between the 2, the Straw Hats have an average of 70.5 pages, while the non-Straw Hats have 81.6. Kinda surprising, but I can see it. With that said, let's answer the main question question of this video and split them up by post and pre-timeskip and check the averages. As said before, pre-timeskip has an average page count of 76 and post-timeskip has an average of 77.8. But this doesn't really show the full story because of this large anomaly right here. So let's take out the longest flashbacks from both and see what we're left with, that being 69.9 for pre-timeskip and 61.2 for post-timeskip. So no, flashbacks are not really getting longer.